Welcome back to The Mindful Hunter. I'm your host as always, Jay Nichol. And today we are going to answer the burning question and the issue about which I have received more DMs over the last 2 months than any other single product. Is the Peax Backcountry Duo headlamp significantly different than the Sofirn D25LR? Now, before I dive into that, quick note about Mindful Reviews. Mindful Reviews is the online platform I've built to bring a community of people together who are interested in unbiased, non-sponsored reviews. No more paid for, sponsored YouTube bullshit. Real, technical, in-depth reviews. This is a membership, subscription-based community. You can buy raffle tickets for the gear I raffle off. Lifetime members qualify to win a prize once a month. You get to engage with me while I review products. You get to submit requests for products to review. And I even engage you and get your input while I'm reviewing products. There's a fantastic forum system. We currently have 222 members. It's growing really fast, really good people. If this is something that interests you and you like the content I put out and you want to support it and see more of it, mindful-reviews.com. Let's dive into a little context about this review. I recently did a 3-way shootout between headlamps, a Nichol, a Phoenix, and the Peax Backcountry Duo. You can go watch that video right here. Now, it turned out the Nichol had a serious flaw when it came to heat output, and the Phoenix didn't have a red light and was a bit small for me. So because of that and many other very justifiable reasons, the Peax came out on top. So I recommended people go get the Peax. I launched that video and immediately got a half a dozen DMs. There was apparently this big controversy. There was a bunch of posts about it on Rockslide, that this Sofirn D25LR was identical to the Peax Backcountry Duo, and you could purchase it from China for $20, or you could purchase the Peax from the States for $90. So I immediately got a bit of a knot in my stomach because I was thinking to myself, did I just, recommend a product that's really just a cheap piece of crap Chinese knockoff? But there seemed to be enough differing opinions. Like there wasn't consensus that they were identical. Now physically they look identical, but there was not consensus about the internals. And in fact, somebody even put Peax on the spot about it, and they responded to an email with exactly this text I'm about to read. Thanks for reaching out and providing your feedback. While the body of the headlamps are very similar, they're identical, the internal workings and performance is much different. We spent almost 18 months working with an electrical engineer to custom program the circuit board to get the extended run times that we get compared to the Sofirn light. In addition, the upgraded 3600 milliamp hour battery alone is 4 times the cost of the generic 18650 batteries supplied with the Sofirn. We already mentioned the upgrade to the LED components, and we also customized some of the power button programming as well. Finally, we offer a lifetime warranty on defects where the Sofirn only has a 1-year warranty. We stand behind the final product we produce as well as the pricing based on our costs and believe our light meets the specific needs of our customers. Thanks again for your feedback, and we hope that you'll continue to support Peax. So they did seem to have a response, but I thought I had an obligation to kind of test that out for myself, and I wasn't able to find anybody who did that online. So I immediately placed an order for the Sofirn, and I started thinking about how I could differentiate these two. At first I thought, well, when they get here, I'll examine the physical appearance and then maybe I'll cut it open and I'll see, are there any physical differences on the inside? Quickly came to the realization I'm not an electrical engineer, and even if they looked different, I wouldn't be able to say with absolute certainty that one was better than the other. So I started thinking to myself, what is the claim here? The claim here is that the Peax light with a better battery and upgraded lights can run for a longer period of time. And when you poll people on Instagram or hunting communities, unequivocally, they will tell you that the single most important feature of a headlamp is battery runtime. At least in the communities that I've engaged in, that seems to be what comes out on top. So I devised a testing system where we were going to primarily look at two variables over time and then compare them to battery usage. So variable number one was temperature. And I used this infrared thermometer gun. It's highly accurate, tested it on a bunch of stuff. It's all the way good to, 0.01 of a degree. And while running it through the series of tests, I would take temperatures at given intervals for both headlamps. I also picked up this digital lux meter. Now, you may hear the term lux and think that's another word for a lumen. It kind of is, it kind of isn't. A lumen is a measure of light intensity that's emitted in all directions from a diode or a light source. A lux is the amount of lumens that fall on a square meter surface. So basically just think of it, it doesn't really matter what the metric is. It matters that it measured light intensity and I could track that intensity over time. So here was the experiment protocol. Before I did anything, I ran both headlamps through several charge-discharge cycles. So it wasn't like the first one out of the box. It had a chance to kind of break in. And I've taken both of them on field trips. The Peax I've had on some hunts. It wasn't hunting season when the Sofirn showed up, but I did do some scouting and some overnight trips. So I took the Sofirn on those trips just to get some real world experience. And again, give them a chance to be broken in so we were comparing apples to apples. Then, fully charged both systems, created a black room in my house, in my downstairs bathroom, and turned them on their brightest white setting that they would go. And I took temperature and lux at 0 hours. And then every hour on the hour, I would measure the light intensity and the temperature intensity. And I recorded all that. Then at the end of that, obviously the lights were fully discharged. So I would record at what time. I started checking them every 15 minutes after the 4th hour because I figured that was about when one of them was going to start to die. I recorded the time to complete discharge for each, and then I recharged them. I timed that time, how long each of them took to recharge, using the same USB connector, using the same cable, and using the same plug in the wall to eliminate all variables. Then I repeated that entire sequence of events. The results from the second round of experimenting were nearly identical. Slightly different, especially when you're doing things with a lux meter. Little variations in how you hold the light can like bump it up 10 or 20 lux, but you're measuring between like 200 and 1900. So it moving around 10 or 15 lux really is insignificant, but it gave me, and then what I did was I averaged those 2 rounds of results, and they were so close that it gave me a great deal of confidence in the results that I had. Then I ran them both to empty, recorded that time again, and charged them both from empty, recorded that time again, and then also recorded those 2 figures. So essentially we have 3 pieces of data spread out over several hours. We have the temperature that the lights went to, we have the light intensity that they were able to produce, and we have the battery information in that how long it took to discharge and how long it took to recharge. And I can tell you, there is a significant difference between these 2 headlamps. Now, how significant and in what direction still remains to be seen. We're going to get into that. I have a fairly significant spreadsheet here. I have compared 11 categories overall, ranked them using my typical forced ranking system. So the forced ranking system is that ideally things can't tie, and you don't rank the performance in a given category out of 10. You give the best product in a category a 1, and you give the worst product in a category a 2. Now, sometimes there's a tie, you can't get away from it, but overall, it forces you to assign a ranking to the products, and you end up with far less draws. You normally have a much more clear winner. So I assessed price, weight, size, durability, comfort, user interface, weather resistance, battery life, recharge time, temp, and brightness. And then scored them all those, and then assigned a winner in each category. So let's start going through the categories, and then I'll get to my breakdown of the testing results as we, hit those categories. Price is pretty clear. The Sofirn is 18 USD and the Peax is 90 USD. And the shipping from China was actually extremely cheap. It wasn't the quickest in the world. I think it took a couple weeks, but it was like $4 or $5. It was not that much money. So Sofirn wins the price category hands down. Now, weight category, as I was mentioning earlier, I don't like to have ties in categories, but with these particular products, I had more ties than normal, primarily because they are completely identical, like literally identical. So both of these headlamps weigh exactly 4.3 ounces with the batteries inside. Obviously size, they are completely identical. Again, they are approximately 3.5 inches long by 1 inch wide. Durability, they get another tie because they are built with the exact same components. They're an aluminum housing, some lenses. They have the same type of seals on the ends that completely unscrew. They have perfectly identical headbands, perfectly identical housing units. So in durability, we tie again. Comfort, obviously a complete tie. Now, user interface, we start to see one of them pull away. I'm gonna read you the instructions for the Sofirn. Click to turn on off the white LED. Press and hold to change the modes from moonlight, low, medium, high. While off, press and hold to turn on the red LED. While on, press and hold to change the mode of the red LED from moonlight, low, medium, high. Click to turn off. I will tell you, while using this, which I've done for tens of hours so far because I did so much testing with it and I had to get it to different levels of intensity several times, it is a bit of a cluster. Like you're pressing the button, you're trying to get it to go from white to red and red to white and the different levels. The pressing and holding is a nice feature. Like if you're on white and you want to stay on white and you press and hold it, it will cycle through all the white lights. That's nice. But overall, it's a little bit convoluted. Whereas when you go to the Peax, the Peax is much simpler to use. Essentially, think of a linear progression all the way through the different levels of white and then all the way through the different levels of red. You turn your light on, one click of each button walks you through the cycle and you just keep going. And if you shut it off, when you turn it back on, it's gonna come back on at white. It'll come back on at the one that was immediately after the one you shot it off at. So as far as the user interface, the Peax is gonna come out on top. Weather resistance. Both of these are rated at IPX6. Now, I've explained this many times before, but IP stands for ingress protection. The first digit refers to solids, the second digit refers to liquids. So the fact that there's an X for the first digit means these are not ranked at all for solids. So it doesn't get a dust rating, which is not the best sign in the world. And the 6 means that it can essentially withstand light droplets of water splashed onto it. In the real world, that means that like a light misty rain won't wreck this. For example, an IP rating of X7 would be that this headlamp could be submerged up to 1 meter for up to 30 minutes. In my opinion, that's the bare minimum a headlamp should shoot for. So if I was handing out pass-fail grades here, and I mentioned this in my last video, the Peax would get a fail for their water resistance. And I don't, again, to be honest, they've clearly just gone with a housing that was readily available overseas in China where this one was already made. They've just bought the same housing. It's either these people who are making the headlamp for them with the different internal components, or the same company that makes the housing for this headlamp company makes this particular housing. However, I think if they've spent apparently 18 months with an engineer to get the headlamp up to snuff as far as battery life and light intensity. I don't understand why a little bit of that time couldn't have been directed towards improving the weather resistance, getting it up to an IPX7, or most of the other headlamps I reviewed are all the way up at IPX8, which is submergible up to 1.5 meters for over 30 minutes, which is, I think, just that extra little bit of security. So as far as weather rating. Now I want to mention one other thing. When I originally reviewed the Peax, one of my gripes was that it's far too easy to spin. Like there's no teeth on there's you can hear it kind of bite back here, but this slides much too freely. Now when it's tight on your head, it seems to get a little bit tighter and the teeth bite in. But if you like to wear it loosely, this is sloppy. Now, this one is much, can you hear that? I'm gonna put it up to the microphone. It's beautiful. It clicks into each position. It feels nice and solid. There's no way for it to move. Now, to clarify, this is the cheap Chinese one that has the far superior kind of mechanism. Now, when I complained about the Peax mechanism, some people got in touch with me and said, you know, mine's totally fine. So whether these things get run in different batches or some of the teeth are smoother on another, or I have a later generation one, I don't know. So I'm not going to completely throw Peax under the bus for it, but I think there's a couple design issues that could be fine-tuned to really bring the Peax to the next level. Okay, now let's take a look at battery life. So when placed on their highest settings, the Peax will run for 7 hours, 8 minutes on average. Now they advertise 6 to 8 hours on their website. So I was very pleased to see this. The vast majority of headlamps I've tested do not live up to their advertised ratings, and they'll create some weird excuse, or especially not once you break them in and you've got, you know, the batteries are 6 months old and you've run them through, you know, 50 charge cycles or whatever. It's much like my complaints about people weighing gear for their websites and claiming their backpack weighs 6 pounds, 8 ounces, and you weigh it and it was 7 pounds, 4 ounces. It's just like, stop it. So I was very happy to see that the advertised length of time to discharge was completely in line with what I was getting in my results. Now, the Sofirn only lasted 4.5 hours. Now, you will recall when I was mentioning the difference between these two batteries, I mentioned the Peax has a 3600 milliamp hour battery and the Sofirn has a 3000 milliamp hour battery. So I was expecting to see a difference here. Theoretically, you would expect to see a 20% difference in time. However, what we actually end up seeing is a 35% difference in time. So to say this another way, while the Peax has a 20% bigger battery, the light lasts 35% longer. And as you'll see here shortly, the light's actually brighter as well. So they are able to give you a brighter light that lasts longer, that exceeds the excess battery life. So this was my first clue that there was something significantly different with the two headlamps, because if the practical life was exceeding the difference in the battery life, they must have been using a higher quality LED or some higher quality components inside. And there's more to explain this as well. Let's first take a look at recharge time. Now, theoretically, if this is a 3600 milliamp hour battery and this is a 3000 milliamp hour battery, it should take 20% less time to charge the 3000 milliamp hour battery than it does to charge the 3600 milliamp hour battery. Again, that is not the case. In fact, on average, the Peax, now the other thing is I used a 2.4 amp USB converter. I originally tried to use a more powerful one and the Peax didn't like it, which at first I found confusing, but then I thought, they may have, in order to extend the life cycle of this battery, they may have placed an impedance on the amperage allowed into the headlamp. Because when you charge things really fast with a lot of power, it tends to not last as long. Like the slower you charge a device, the longer the device tends to last. So I'm not gonna say that's what they did do, but that would be a rational explanation for why a high-powered USB port, the Peax won't charge with it. You have to use like a pretty average one, like an iPhone block, you know? So on average, the Peax took 5 hours and 13 minutes to charge to 100% from flat dead. The Sofirn took 5 hours and 44 minutes. So we have a 31-minute discrepancy in the direction of the one with the smaller battery. So here's the next data point. The only way to explain that would have to be a higher quality battery, significantly higher quality battery, because not only did it not take more time, it took less time, and higher quality internals, like the components, the wiring, the soldering, the materials, the things that inside that are going to convey that electricity in order to charge that battery have to be of higher quality so that they're more conductive. Okay, so there's recharge time. Now let's get into temperature. Now the reason I was interested in temperature is because that last headlamp review I didn't have any of this equipment. I was doing more kind of practical reviews with those. This will be the new way that I review headlamps in addition to practical field testing. One of them melted, and so I was clearly interested. I'm wondering how hot these things get. Also, heat dissipation would be an analog or a proxy for quality of electrical components. So the higher quality components and the better shielding that you use and the better LED light that you use in your device, the lower the temperature that's going to be generated. The cheaper the components, the higher the temperature that's going to be generated. So we can see that at hour 0, when I just turned them on, set them down, used the thermometer, the infrared thermometer, and took a reading. The Peax came on at 104.3 degrees Fahrenheit, and the Sofirn turned on at 112.2 degrees Fahrenheit. So right out of the gate, this one is 8 degrees hotter. And at 100 degrees, it's like 8%. I mean, that is a statistically significant figure. So right away, I was like, okay, this is very intriguing. And then I checked in again at hour 1, and the Peax clocked in at 111.3, and the Sofirn clocked in at 119.8. So we've had a slight bump. We're maybe around an 8.5 degree discrepancy now. But as the lights are on for longer, the temperature is going up, and it's going up quicker in the Sofirn than it is in the Peax. Again, supporting better quality internals and LED in the Peax. Now things at first I was a bit confused by this. At hour 2, I took the temperatures, and the temperatures were actually dropping. And I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. They've been on for longer. But it will make sense when we get to the brightness section of the review, because as the brightness was coming down, as the lights had been on for longer and they were getting dimmer, they were generating less heat. So at hour 2, the Peax clocks in at 104.3 and the Sofirn clocks in at 107.2. Now you might say, because the Sofirn was able to close the gap and take the 8 degree discrepancy that was present at time 0 and 1 and shrink it down to a 3 degree discrepancy at hour 2, it must have, better cooling properties. I would argue something else. When we get over to the brightness, you're going to see that the Sofirn started to drop off hard. So the reason that it was cooling down quicker was that it was getting dimmer much faster than the Peax. Yet one more data point to support the Peax as being a superior headlamp. We can continue on. Hour 3, we get to 105.6 for the Peax, 106.8 for the Sofirn, and by hour 4, we get to 94.5 and 94.6. Shortly after hour 4, the battery died in the Sofirn, so I don't have an hour 5 temperature reading for it. And I do have hours 5, 6, and 7 temperature readings for the Peax. It just consistently went down, but I haven't plotted them on this graph because I wanted to show the discrepancy. And if I ran it all the way down to 0, it would basically compress the results and they don't stick apart as nicely. Kind of nerdy graph stuff you don't need to worry about. Now, finally, let's look at brightness over time, because I think this is the one that really shows most clearly why the Peax is a superior headlamp. So again, we're measuring lux. That is the amount of lumens spread out over 1 meter. I had a measuring station where the light meter was at a fixed location on the ground in a dark room, and I had markings on the wall so that the headlamp was getting held at the exact same location every time. Now, I did do this with both the white lights and the red lights. I haven't graphed out the red light comparisons. I was actually unaware of this, but the red light takes a significant lower amount of battery. So the red light basically wasn't moving at all until the battery died because of the white light, and then you weren't getting any readings at all. So the red light did not tell nearly as much of a story as the white light. But if you're a member at Mindful Reviews, this spreadsheet gets uploaded to Mindful Reviews and any member can download it and look at the data. And I have all the data for both the red lights and the white lights as part of this spreadsheet. So at hour 0, when I turned them both on, they both scored exactly 1900 lux. Now that's not saying these are 1900 lumen things. You know, the closer you hold the lamp, the higher the lux reading, the further away, because it's the amount of lumens that's falling. So I was just looking to do a fixed test and then measure a change in intensity over time. So what the number isn't nearly as important as how it relates to the relative number from the other device and the relative change in numbers over time. So at time 0, we have 1900 lux, which in itself I found fascinating, because when you turn these two lights on, I'll even go a step before that. When you look into these lights, the LEDs are clearly different. They have different kind of outlines, they are different shapes, they're different sizes. I mean, they're very close. One is, kind of white, yellow, the other one has a bit of orange hue to it, and then the other one is red, and they're both outlined by black lines, but those black lines are thicker in one than the other. Like, there is a physical difference between the LED lights in these housings. But when you turn them on, the Peax is significantly bluer. Now that would be a cooler ranking on the Kelvin scale, which may also contribute to some of the reduced battery life, because I believe a cooler light spectrum creates less heat and therefore could potentially create less draw on the battery. But either way, I figured also this one is advertised at 1000 lumens and this one is advertised at 500 lumens. But it's hard on these Chinese websites. You're not really sure if they're talking about this model or an older model, so I didn't want to hang my hat on the advertised ratings. All of that being said, when you fully charge these, turn them on, and measure the lux in an identical manner, you get 1900 lux at time 0. We wait 1 hour, we come back, it cuts in half. And the Peax reports a lux of 925, and the Sofirn drops off to 830. At hour 2, the Peax is at 890, the Sofirn drops off to 750. So they're starting to spread apart on us a little bit more. At hour 3, the Peax is 880, the Sofirn is 725. Then at hour 4, we have the Peax at 603 and the Sofirn at 480. So up until this point, we kind of have this gradually widening gap between the two. And then between hour 4 and hour 5, it just blows completely apart. The Sofirn dies completely, whereas from hour 3 to, and in fact, I didn't even put hour 7 on here because again, it goes to 0. But basically from hour 3 to hour 7, you get a very gradual drop off. Now, you are not going to be walking out of the mountains carrying a fully boned out animal with this thing for the last, 30 to 45 minutes, the light gets pretty dim, and you'd be able to cook with it. You'd be able to see around camp with it, but I wouldn't want to be doing some death hike out in a mountain with it. But all the way up to, hour 5 for sure, maybe even pressing into hour 6, there was an extremely usable light. So the difference in performance, like again, this light dies at 4.5 hours. This light dies at 7 hours and 8 minutes. So you're getting a 35% performance increase. You're getting a reduction in the amount of time that it takes to recharge. You're getting a reduction in the amount of heat generated. Other than the weird kind of clicky housing, which I'm willing to admit maybe a one-off, the Peax is superior across every single metric. So the bottom line is, can you get away with the Sofirn? 100%. If you're on a budget, and you're not planning to be doing 6-hour hikes in the middle of the night, and you just want a light that's going to do what you need it to do, this thing blows most of the other headlamps I've tested out of the water, and it costs $19. That's crazy. And in fact, I would say it was a no-brainer to buy it until I go test the Peax. And I will say, I am the type of guy, I have definitely found myself doing extended nighttime hikes. I've had times where I didn't have the opportunity to charge the light between nights, and I might have hiked 2 or 3 hours one night, and then all of a sudden I'm in a situation where I gotta hike again, and I haven't had a chance to recharge my battery. So for the safety, the security, and the reliability, for me, I'm dropping the $90 on the Peax. The last thing I'll mention in that regard is that Peax offers a lifetime warranty on their headlamp. Sofirn only offers a 1-year warranty. So yeah, you're paying $90, but you're getting a far superior headlamp, and you're getting the peace of mind of a warranty. So there you have it, folks. The Peax Backcountry Duo versus the Sofirn D25LR. As always, jump in the comments below. Are there things I didn't look at that you wish I had? Do you have any arguments with my testing protocol? Did I, misinterpret something? Do you have something more that you can add from your own experience that we could all learn from? Please, I would love to continue the conversation about this review. What headlamps do you want me to see? What do you want to see versus the Peax? Which one should I go get next? I got a lot of hunts coming up. I got tons of opportunity to test headlamps. But drop those comments in the comments section below. Let's have a conversation. Let's all learn from each other. If you could engage with this content in any way, I would greatly appreciate it. It's all about the algorithm on YouTube and social media. So if you could like, comment, share, subscribe, it would mean the world to me. If you have any questions for me specifically, drop them in the comments section below. DM me on Instagram at mindful_hunter. Shoot me an email at j@mindfulhunter.com. One last shameless plug for Mindful Reviews. I honestly believe it's one of the best places to come for unadulterated, non-sponsored gear reviews. I'm making it my life's work to be as critical and analytical as possible and get you the best information possible. So if you want to support that community, mindful-reviews.com. And until next time, thanks for tuning in.